trying to get our microphones. Can you hear that? Can you hear me on the mic? No. Okay, so hopefully you're all on. Is everybody on?
Yes.
Bill, are you on?
Check, check.
Sibilance, 1, 2, sibilance.
Okay, welcome to our college panel night, everybody. I am Liz Pierce. I am one of the school counselors here at Freeport High School for the students in the G through M alphabet. We have Alexis Robb, one of our other school counselors here tonight, and Dana Clark is in the back. So you all might recognize one of us for working with your students. So we are so fortunate that we have all of these wonderful college admissions representatives with us. You will see their names, and I'm going to introduce them quickly or have them introduce themselves and just say a quick bit about their school before we get going. I do have a list of questions, but please feel free to raise your hand if something comes up when they're in the middle of talking about something that just sparks a question. This is definitely an open type forum. We don't need to be super formal because really this is for you to find out what colleges are looking for in your child's application either next year or in the years to come, depending on how old your student is. So to start, we do have Bates College here, Bowdoin, Roger Williams, University of Maine at Farmington, and University of Maine at Orono. And we have been so fortunate to work with most of these reps here with a lot of our students. So it's fun when they come back year to year and we get to know them pretty well. So I will start. Why don't we just go down the line, and if you want to introduce yourself and just say a little bit about your school, that would be great.
Good evening. My name is Scott Alexander. I've been working in admissions for about 20 years now. I didn't go to Bates, I actually went to Bowdoin. I've worked mostly at small liberal arts colleges, so I worked at Colby as well, I've worked at Connecticut College. I'm actually the person in my family to go to college. If you have any of those type of questions, I'm happy to answer as well. Bates is a small liberal arts and sciences college in Lewiston.
Hi, my name is Catherine Stegman. I'm an associate dean at Bowdoin, and I went to Bates. That's how this works. I've been in admissions for 14 years. I've been at Bowdoin for 8. Before that, I was at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and then before that was at Bates. So I've also been around the small liberal arts college circuit. I'm the senior liaison to athletics, and so I work with all of the coaches on athletic recruiting at Bowdoin, and happy to take questions about that. Bowdoin is a small liberal arts college in Brunswick, Maine.
Excuse me, good evening. I'm Bill McMurray. I am the Northeast New England Regional Representative for Roger Williams University, which is in Bristol, Rhode Island. But I also went to Bates. Grew up in Brunswick, actually. So I have the pleasure of working for Roger Williams while living in Portland. So while most regional reps are hundreds or thousands of miles from their college, I'm 2.5 hours, but I still only have to go there about once a month, which is very nice. I get to work with Maine students. Roger Williams has about 4,000 students, mostly residential, very, very solid liberal arts college, but we also have pre-professional programs in architecture, engineering, business, marine biology, criminal justice, things like that. So love to talk to you about that later as well.
All right, good evening. My name's John Hayes. I'm the Assistant Director of Admission at the University of Maine at Farmington. I also went to Bates, but I ended up transferring to the University of Maine at Farmington, so there's a tie-in there. I primarily travel in southern Maine and Rhode Island. I was a college basketball coach for about 18 years. That's what I did for a living. I decided to retire from that, and admissions is it's a similar field for me. UMF is a small public liberal arts college in the UMaine system. We also have some unique pre-professional programs in actuarial science. We also, as a lot of people know, we're a formidable teacher education school as well, especially in the state of Maine.
Good evening. My name is Nick Ray. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Recruitment at the University of Maine. I did not go to Bates. I have been working in college admissions here in the state of Maine for about 16 years. I worked previously at St. Joseph's College and Thomas College as well. The University of Maine is Maine's largest public university with about 9,000 undergraduate students. We are the flagship institution for the University of Maine system as well. And our major academic programs fall under areas such as business, engineering, education, the natural sciences, and liberal arts as a whole.
Great, thanks so much. So just to start it off, we really like to start with a very general question, and some of the answers I think might spark some questions from you possibly. So I'm wondering, what are the main factors your college considers in making your admissions decisions? Scott, do you want to?
Sure, I'll start off. So, the main factors sometimes are actually out of your control. I like to frame it in this way, and I know sometimes it can be very difficult for teenagers to not take their admission decision personally, but often the admission decision reflects more about us than it does about you. So places like Bates that are small arts and sciences colleges, right, we have 500 spots, right? We don't have thousands. So our size dictates a lot of how we make decisions. What the initiatives, what the goals are of the institution, right? That plays a factor, right? Schools in Maine, we're committed to Mainers, right? That's part of why we were founded. And so that can play a role, like where you're from, what you want to study. All of that comes into play when we're creating our community. And so some of the factors, and I know maybe this is not how you were anticipating this question to be answered, but some of the factors are actually out of your control. And it's just about how our process works. So I'll start the conversation now.
So maybe I'll talk about the things that are in your control. So Scott's right. So much of, a lot of the questions we get is, well, what are my chances of getting in? Or, it's like the most impossible question to answer because we don't know who else is applying. We don't know who else from Maine or from California or anything else. So what you can control would be the curriculum that you take and how well you do in your classes, the thought and intention that you put into your essay, and who you choose to write your teacher recommendations. Luckily, you have some test optional colleges sitting in front of you, so we will look at a test score if you want to submit it, but we don't require it. While testing is technically under your control, that's a really weird way to put it, you don't have to submit to a lot of colleges out there now. So those are the things that you can own and do the best you can at within reason, and the rest really is market forces that do come into play.
As a place that's considerably less selective than Bates or Bowdoin, we really look for consistency and authenticity in the application. We sort of start every review with an overall assessment of the student's record, and if he or she has a good program and basically a B+ average or better, she or she's going to be a strong candidate in most of our programs, as long as we find some level of engagement in school and community activities and can determine that this all kind of comes together in some authentic package to represent this student as that sort of college-ready person. So we're not looking to brag about how many people we turn away, or we're not forced to make those kinds of hair-splitting decisions among excellent students. But if we know someone can do the work, that generally means about a B+ average and a good high school program. That's where, and we're test optional. So we'd like to talk to students less about what it takes to get in than what it takes to stay in and to want to stay in, and how important that is.
Yeah, and I would agree with Bill and Catherine and everyone about those factors. They call it the holistic approach. I think sometimes in my situation, we're a state institution, so we're far less selective. Although we will deny students. It's looking at somebody who might be like a diamond in the rough. Maybe what's the tipping point? What's gonna push you through if you're on the edge? The level of engagement that you show, You know, are you the one making the phone calls to the admissions office to follow up? Do you show some sincerity? Have you put thought into your essay? I mean, there's a lot of, again, all of us are different. We're humans, so when we look at an application, you know, you're kind of, I would say, a victim of circumstance, but we're all different in how we look at stuff as much as we have our guidelines. So it's, you know, a chance to get to know the representative from your school, find out, you know, what's it going to take for me to get accepted here? What are the tipping points? You know, I think that, to me, that's very important. I know a lot of the stuff is going to be the same across the boards, but if you're, you know, maybe you're on the edge and you want to find out with using your guidance counselors, or if you're not from Freeport, I know a lot of schools have a specific college and career counselor. Ask them about the school. Find out, you know, is the essay more important than the SAT? I mean, there's a lot of research that you can do, and I think for me, it's when I talk to students instead of parents. I think that's important. I like it when I get a phone call or an email from a student, a little less than I do when I get it from a parent. That's, you know, I just think that's very helpful. It shows a certain level of maturity, and as Bill said, that's the kind of stuff that allows you to succeed when you're in college, okay, is that you show some initiative.
Lucky me. I think the last thing I would mention is everyone on this panel, we're always looking for a reason that we can offer admission. You know, our goal is not to deny students. It's can we give a student an opportunity at the end of the day? Because we want students, of course, that we feel are going to be successful in our environment academically, but also students that are going to add to our community setting as well. So we're always looking for a reason to possibly offer admission to a student.
Thanks, Nick. Why don't we have you just continue for a moment and talk a little bit about the transcript and testing, and maybe reflect a little bit about how the admissions committee evaluates each student's transcript and how important testing may or may not be to your school.
Okay. So when it comes to transcript, you know, what we say at the University of Maine, for example, is we're looking at a transcript very differently depending on what the student really is interested in studying. So when we're evaluating a transcript for a business student, we're looking at it much differently through a different lens than if we were looking at a student for engineering, let's say. You know, so the classes that the student's taking, the level of classes that they're taking at the high school level, whether it be honors or advanced placement or just regular college prep. And then we're also looking at grades and how consistent the student is overall throughout their high school years and how they're finishing their high school years as well. You know, going into their senior year, are they a consistent student or on an upward trend as a whole? So those are very important and kind of the foundation factors for us as we're starting to look at an applicant for various academic programs. At the University of Maine, we are an institution that does require test scores, and it is going to factor into an admissions decision for us. And as I mentioned, each program has different entrance requirements, whether it be GPA or test scores. So we're going through a multi-level approach to reviewing an application. Test scores also do factor in for us when it comes to merit scholarships as well. So we tell students that are seriously considering a school that does require test scores that they should consider taking the exam more than once. You'll find a majority of schools that do require testing typically will allow a super score and give the best case scenario for the student in the review process, meaning if you take the exam more than once, we're going to take your best evidence-based score and your best math score and combine them together, not only for general admission, but also for merit scholarships when it comes to the University of Maine as a whole. And what I also tell families is, kind of reverting back to what I said earlier, we actually ask students to select a first choice major and a second choice major. And if a student doesn't meet their requirements for their first choice, we're considering them for their second choice. And if they don't meet the requirements by chance for that, then we're considering for an undecided program as a whole. So that's a multi-level approach when we're looking at the transcript and test scores and how we can offer admission into a program.
Yeah, so we're at University of Maine at Farmington. We are a test optional school, so we do put a lot of value on that transcript. Maybe we're a little bit different. We will actually, it's kind of a tedious process, but something that we believe in is we recalculate the high school GPA. So typically we'll take what is available for us on the transcript, and we're mainly creating a UMF GPA based on English, math, social sciences, regular, lab sciences. There's a few foreign language. There's some other classes that blend in there as well. And we call those our core classes, and we're focusing our GPA on that. So it may look a little bit different than what is on the high school transcript. Now, does that mean we don't value music and art and PE? Certainly not. We certainly take that into consideration, but what we're trying to do is to get people looking as similar as possible. It's basically, everyone will know that's an impossible task on a transcript. But for us, especially where we have a lot of schools in Maine, where we have consistency, we're trying to create that. We also use that to determine our merit scholarships and then any GPA requirements that we have. For us, our more stringent requirements would be in our education program, our biology and sciences, our math, actuarial sciences typically require a 2.75 or better. And the education piece is always a tricky one because there is a praxis test and there's different testing things that education students have to take. So sometimes we're really cautious about dipping too far. Say, I don't know, they may not, if you don't test well and you say, oh, I'm going to submit my SAT scores. And then you're trying to get into the education so it's kind of like Maine with their engineering. With our education, we're a little bit more stringent, only to protect students. We don't want to put them into a program where they're continually going to struggle and invest money into it. But basically that's what we do. We really spend time on the transcript, evaluating how students do in the core classes, because typically for most colleges, that's what they're going to see.
Generally, I think whether college is highly selective or not so much, we're looking at the transcript through the same four lenses. We're looking at the breadth and depth of the program. How many years of English, math, foreign language, social studies, and lab science, and arts. So while not everything that counts can be counted and not everything that can be counted counts, we do count courses and we count breadth and depth. We also look at overall performance. We look at trend from year to year and from subject to subject. And we look at the rigor of the program. Are there honors or advanced or AP or IB courses along the way? And every student is going to present a little bit differently, and every college is going to look at it a little differently. But the transcript typically, I think, makes up at least a half, if not 2/3 of the time that any one of us spends on an application.
We've really had to adapt as Maine has adapted proficiency-based grading, so and then unadapted proficiency-based grading. Just, I think we all work really contextually, so we're working really hard to understand the high school you're coming from, the environment you're coming from, what's available to you at your school. So, I read some schools in California that offer, all 41 AP courses. Which is ridiculous. But that's what they do, right? And so at Freeport, you have different choices than that. And I just want to reassure you, we're not going to compare you at Freeport High School to a student who has very different curriculum opportunities at a very different high school with a very different grading system. We're really in the business of looking at your potential to do the work at Bowdoin and your fit for Bowdoin, personally. We're looking to see, not are you better than this other student over here, but are you a good fit for Bowdoin? So we're comparing you to the institution. We don't compare you to each other, which I think is a big myth out there that I hope to bust in my work in admissions. Is we're really looking at you as an individual and the opportunities that you've had in your high school setting. And sometimes that includes AP exams or AP classes if you have had the opportunity to take them. We want to see them. We want to see that you've challenged yourself. So just trying to reassure you that we really take time to get to know, yes, your transcript and the classes you've taken, but also where are you coming from and what opportunities have you had access to?
So part of my role is international recruitment. So just to piggyback on what Kat was just saying, at Bates we have applicants from 137 different countries. You can imagine the different curriculums that we end up seeing in our applicant pool. You can't tell me that there's one way to learn, right? So we get to know and contextualize your application with what is available to you. That even sometimes the styles of education, right? They're so different. And that's what makes education so dynamic at our institutions, is that we're able to bring people from these different learning environments and have them learn together. That's what makes it really interesting. Now, one thing that's a little bit different at places like Bates and Bowdoin, we don't admit to a major. So you're admitted based on your academic record. There aren't different standards for neuroscience majors or math majors, right? So you're admitted to the college, not to a particular course of study. So that will vary from institution to institution. And then in terms of testing, we are test optional as well. Bowdoin was the leader in the test optional movement. Bates followed shortly thereafter. So the College Board's position is that your SAT predicts your first year GPA in college. That's an interesting data point. It's just a data point though. Our educations aren't 1 year. Our education are 4 years. We care about how you're going to do during your entire 4 years of school. So there is a website. It's called fairtest.org. So there are over 1,000 colleges and universities in the US, up to 4,000, that are test optional or flexible. So that can be a really good resource. And just know they are, the SAT subject tests are run by a different organization than the ACT. So they ask questions slightly differently. So if you feel like you haven't been successful on the SAT, you might want to try the ACT. Not that I want you to give more money, right? It's a monopoly, that's a business, right? And for places like ours, we feel very uncomfortable with a third party playing a role in saying where you have access to education. That doesn't sit well with us, and it might not sit well with you either.
Thank you. Something that came up was something about the major, and that was one of our questions, so I'm going to skip to that for now, and maybe ask Bill, maybe starting with you, is do you think it's helpful for a student to have a focused major in mind at Roger Williams? And then
I don't think kids need to go into this thinking that they have to have a major, but if they do, it can be helpful at places like ours and other universities where we do admit to program. We have 6 different schools and colleges, but the most popular major of all, when you take them all together, is I'm not sure yet. And that's generally okay at most institutions, large and small. There is a cadre of truly undecided students, and I know we have very, very intentional advising for first-year students anyway, but specifically for undecided students. We also know that roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of the kids who think they know what they want, we're going to change their mind anyway, and I'm one of them.
I'm wondering if anyone can respond to how easy it is it to change your major once you've maybe gone into a school. So maybe Nick, that's something you could respond to with Maine, because I know students who might apply to a program and not get in are hoping to change into that major later.
So just because we don't offer you admission necessarily in your first choice major doesn't mean that you can't eventually be in it at the university as a whole. I think there's only really 2 majors at the university that are very selective and have caps overall. Otherwise, students are basically asking for a change of major request either midway through their first year or at the end of their first year. The only 2 programs that have kind of caps right now are nursing, which is not uncommon at most institutions that offer nursing because of clinical rotations, and for us is biomedical engineering as well, that has a certain rotation as well. So outside of that, as long as a student is performing well in their first semester, in their first year, there is opportunity for them to meet that first goal that they had initially, even though we may not have provided admission to that first choice. I will say too, we offer 6 different ways to be undecided. You could be undecided in each of our colleges or a general undecided as a whole, even at a large public university like UMaine.
Thanks. Is there anyone else who wants to respond to anything about major and how important that might be to the application process?
Maybe your life process, but I think a lot of students feel the pressure to choose pre-med or engineering because that's what they know or that's what their family has told them they need to do, and then they get to our institutions with more than 40 academic areas, and all of a sudden they're introduced to things like Russian language or computer science or things that they haven't had access to in high school. And I think it opens up new worlds and new opportunities, and I think no matter where you end up, I think it's really important to be open-minded, and I think any one of us up here would say, you know, the jobs that you guys will have, we have no idea what those are going to be, and that the ability to be a really good thinker and problem solver and communicator, those are all really important skills, and you can get those, you know, in any of our schools, but that the future of medicine and technology and engineering even is really undecided, and to be able to be able to draw upon a lot of different skills as you start looking for a career is really important. You know, we have a young woman who works at Apple, and she always an alumna, and she always says, you know, the biggest issues facing technology is not like how small can we get the computer chips, or like where can we insert artificial intelligence next. It's truth, you know, and privacy. Like, those are the big issues facing technology. And how do you learn about those things? Well, you take a philosophy class, and you ask what is truth and what ought we to do with artificial intelligence. So even if you're thinking about engineering, you're never just going to be engineering in a bubble. You're going to be engineering within a society that has complex issues and questions, and the more open you can be to learning about other cultures or other topics, the better off you're going to be as just a human in the world. So, sorry.
Thank you. So, yes, so we get a lot at the panel, and I really appreciate all of your thoughts on that. So, one topic that I know last year was a big hit, and I think a lot of students spend a lot of time on it, is their college essay. And so I'm hoping, because I do know that is a piece of the admissions process, you can talk about how important it is to your school, in turn, and then are there any topics to avoid, and maybe share some anecdotes of essays that you particularly liked, and then maybe also reflect on supplemental questions if you want to as well. So, you want to start?
Sure. So the essay is probably the most fun part of the application for us to read. We get to humanize the application through the essay. When we read your essay, we're looking for a couple things. First, we're making sure that we're looking at your writing ability, right? We will never put a student up to fail. We want to make sure that you can handle the work at our institution. So we're looking for writing ability. We also look at what you choose to tell us about yourself. You have 650 words. That's not a lot of space. Your job is not to solve all the world's problems, which students try to do in 650 words. So I love reading the essay. I think there are certain topics on the Common Application that lend themselves to being problematic. So for instance, there is a topic about, tell us about someone that's of importance to you, significance. Often that essay gets framed more about the other person than the candidate. Another topic is a failure essay, which can be done well. You just have to spin it the right way that you come off well. And so that can be a challenge. You have to really have strong writing skills in order to get that nuance.
A lot of kids don't pass their driving test, FYI, on the first try. Just so you don't feel alone.
I have to say, I've probably read about 20,000 essays in my career. I read about 1,000 a year. There's not one topic we're looking for. You shouldn't struggle so much to write about something that we've never read, because I've read almost everything, right? It's very rare for me to be like, oh, I've never read that essay before. But essays that work, they work when they're germane to that student. Only that student could write the essay. So there's a term you might want to do an internet search on, all with the tips tonight. So if you look up essays that worked, just look up that phrase, essays that worked. There are about 7 institutions that give sample essays on their websites that you can use as guidance to go to write your own. If you read enough of them, you will hopefully come to 2 conclusions. 1, there's no one way to write, and 2, there's no one thing you need to write about.
We want you to write your own essay. And it feels like I shouldn't have to say that, but we do. We want you to write your own essay because we want to know where you're at in your life. We do not expect you to have deep, profound thoughts. We don't expect you to be funny. If you are, go for it, but if you're not, don't. Basically, the point of the essay is like, where are you right now as a 17-year-old in the world? Like, let us in on your perspective and where you're at right now as a human, not give us the cure to cancer or make it seem like you have everything figured out. We get it. 17 is hard. You're asked to decide these big decisions. The other myth I hope to bust tonight is that you have to have endured some sort of hardship in order to be compelling to us. If you've been in an information session with me at Bowdoin, you know I talk about Modern Family. And the episode that's my favorite is the one where the daughter gets really mad at the mom for giving her such an easy life that she has nothing to write her college essay about. So the mom is like, sorry I provided for you for all these years, and drives Haley up into the middle of nowhere and drops her off without her phone or wallet and creates some hardship for Haley. I think what's compelling to us is not like what you've been through, but how you process it and where you're at with it right now. So that a student could have endured significant hardship and their ability to reflect on it is what's compelling to us, not that they had the hardship. Does that make sense? So we're looking for that.
One pet peeve of mine is that it's not a college essay. If you read the application, it is a personal statement. And that's what we want, is a personal statement related to one of the topics in question. As far as supplemental questions, we don't have any at Roger Williams, but often those supplements at more selective schools and some others boil down to why us? What is it about us? What do you see as our special sauce? And my advice to the students is figure that out for yourself. Find something interesting about the college you're applying to and write about that. Don't feel there's a formula. You don't have to write about the glistening new science center that they just built, even if you consider yourself pre-med. Write about something else that you saw, some really cool study space in the library or something else. But be yourself, be authentic.
Yeah, I would echo that. Has anyone ever watched a beauty pageant and they have do the personal statement? And sometimes you can tell when they're talking about something they have no clue about, like world peace or. So echo what's been said. Play to your strength. Write about what you know. Don't put yourself. I saw that lovely woman from Bowdoin, and I want to write about Modern Family because she talked about it. Just, if you've never seen the show, don't write it, play to your strength and put some time and effort into it. And again, I talked about it before, the essay can be a tipping point, and it's different for every school. At Maine Farmington, it might be the difference, between a scholarship and not a scholarship. It is important. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare, but it has to be well written, and it has to be who you are. I think that's the most important thing. It really shows when you're writing out of your subject area, and I think that can be a turnoff. And also complaining, where you blame other people. I know, there are a lot of hardships. People have been through things, but when people take that chance to explain why something happened and they use it to point fingers, this teacher did this or that, just stick to the facts. If you've had something that you want to talk about that's been tough, just talk about it in that context. Don't go about it in a blaming way, because that's not a good way to demonstrate who you are.
Can I just jump in quick? One more don't. If your entire application is going to be centered around your all-state football status or baseball status, and your recommendations are going to talk about what a great athlete you are, your counselor's going to try to write your essay about something else. Show another side of yourself. Just a thought. Sorry.
I'm going to go in a different direction and just speak to that we want a polished piece. We want a piece that's well written, that's been spell checked. I know this is common sense, but it's amazing how many times we see errors on a college essay. And also, if you're a family member that's reviewing an essay for your son or daughter, be careful that you're not rewriting it for them per se, because we can tell when we suddenly read the essay and go through it, and then we say, geez, this sentence doesn't sound right. So make sure that you're providing feedback, or allowing the student to put the feedback in their own words. And just paying close attention to that. And as a student, you want to have multiple eyes on the essay, not only family members, but teachers, guidance counselors, because you never know what one person may pick up on than another. And you just want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward with this piece that you really have control over in the application process.
Thanks. Are there any questions?
Yes. Could you just elaborate more on what you're looking for in that student? Is it character? Is it ethics? Is it, obviously, you're looking for smart people who can write. That's a given. But talk a little bit more about what compels you to want that student at your institution, the softer things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would all have a different list of adjectives that we're looking for, and I will say, if we were looking for the same things in every student, we'd be a really boring place to go to school. So for some students, it's grit and resiliency and their ability to kind of step up when they've needed to, whether life situations or otherwise. Sometimes it's awareness of the world and people around them. Sometimes it's kindness and empathy. So I think it depends a lot on what we sort of couch as the context of the file. But I know that colleges are building communities that live in dorms and are in residence halls, and I would say for pretty much any college out there, they're looking for kids who are going to come and be good community members, and that's not blame throwing, as we say. Writing about a topic that may just seem kind of glib or shallow. So, it doesn't have to be, a deep, meaningful piece of writing. It also shouldn't be taken carelessly. So I think it really does depend. And, we want students who are going to be contributing members of our community in different ways. I don't know if that helps.
Any other questions back there?
You guys individually have probably read thousands and thousands of essays, and I wonder if you could give an example of an essay that you still find memorable or that moved you, to sort of help illustrate the points that you made.
The one that comes to mind for me, we used to have a question when I worked for Bowdoin College in Massachusetts, before the days of the Common App. That's how old I am. We had a question, tell us about a risk you've taken and what became of it and what you learned. And, lots of students wrote about, the risk of playing with a torn ACL and all these other risky, but this one kid wrote an essay about how he had a crush on this girl since the 5th grade, and as a junior, he finally summoned the courage to ask her out to a date, and she shot him out of the sky with one of those, sorry, my cat's gonna eat my homework kind of excuses. And he wrote about this with a sense of, he was really proud of the fact that he finally put this demon away. When she rejected him, he said, okay, I can get on with my life now. And he just did it with a sense of humor and self-deprecation, and he wrote it really, really well. And it was about this little tiny event and this little tiny life in this little tiny town in Maine. And I remember it to this day. And we couldn't admit him, unfortunately.
One of my favorite essays of all time, a student, she grew up in New York City, and she wrote her essay about tofu. Who knew you could write about bean curd at the admitted college? Well, she wrote about how, like tofu, she can be placed in any environment, and she would absorb the flavor. So if you ever cook with tofu, it has that cooking property, right? So it made us laugh. When we were around the committee table, she became the tofu girl. That's right, that's the tofu girl. She's personality, she can tell a story, she's going to be a dynamic presence on campus. She was. We hired her to be a tour guide. And then when she graduated that summer, she published her first book and was on the New York Times Best Summer Reading List. Her book was about food. You know, everyone has a relationship to food. Some of us are just more mindful of it than others. And with a biting sense of humor, she could really zero in on that relationship. She's now a creative writing professor. So we kind of knew where she was going, we just had to help her along the way.
You referenced talking about the big game. So I started reading an essay that I really thought was about scoring the winning goal in the big game. But it was about this lacrosse player who was responsible for doing the face-off at the beginning of the halves and after scoring. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And he was really, really good at doing this face-off and had this ridiculous win percentage on that face-off. And he gets into the big game, and all of a sudden he starts failing at this. And along the way, he had developed this crazy superstition. Does anyone remember Nomar Garciaparra when he'd get up to bat? And yeah, right. He'd had this kind of Nomar Garciaparra approach to the way that he would prepare to do this face-off. And he had this moment in the game of does my superstition work? And should I abandon it because I'm now failing at these face-offs? And if I then stop doing my superstition, does that become the superstition? And he kind of went deep, to your point, into a small moment in this game. And I don't know whether he won or lost, but as an athlete myself, and as someone who works with athletes a lot, he just took a small moment and found some meaning in it, which was that hard work is what matters, not luck. And that he'd worked really hard at this skill, and that's what he needed to rely on. So again, kind of found a lesson, I guess, in that moment. But that I read the first year that I worked at Bates, and it stuck with me ever since.
I think one from this year was I usually like the funny, sarcastic ones, but there was a young man from Maine, he's African American, and he wrote an essay about being at a high school dance, and they were dancing to hip-hop music, and everyone was dropping the N-word, and they were his friends, and how he said, well, I don't really blame them, but he's felt I don't know, it just put, and I consider myself a fairly open-minded, I value everybody, for some reason, the way he I felt like I was in his shoes, and I noticed something, and I was like, yeah, that's not good that this is accepted, just the way he put it. He goes, I don't hold it against them. He goes, but they think they have a license to do this because they're my friend. It was just an interesting, it really made me, I don't know, I felt like I was in his shoes. It really changed my perspective quite a bit. And then, the other thing is kind of not the essay, but you never know what's going to get read, is on the Common App, there's a disciplinary piece. Have you ever been? I look at that, and sometimes I my God, that's beautiful. Because somebody got suspended one time, and they said because there was some cyberbullying that was going on, and she didn't like it, so she got on there, and she went to town and unleashed, and she got suspended, but I checked with the guidance counselor, yeah, I know, it was on, but I was like, God, I love that, that's college, I know she got suspended, but she stood up for these people, so you just never know. I'm not saying go out and get in trouble. I'm not advocating that. But we read everything. So I thought that was that stuck out in my mind. There were some other disciplinary actions where I thought, that's actually pretty cool.
Nick, do you have a favorite essay?
Yeah, I do. I read one this year that was actually very well written. It was a student that I met with, and he wrote about the fact that he was colorblind. And he said, how some people view that as a disability, and he uses that as an advantage because he never has to worry what color shirt to put on. And he said the only challenge I ever had, he said, was one time I was outside of the state of Maine, and the street light was horizontal instead of vertical, and I couldn't tell whether I had to stop or go. And that's how he ended his essay. But it just provided a kind of a genuine experience, and he was positive about what he dealt with on a daily basis. And I think the biggest thing is what we're all looking for in our essays, and you've heard all the examples, is we're looking for a genuine piece. You know, if you have a good friend, let's say John wrote an essay about himself and he dropped it on the ground, and if I picked it up, could I read it and say, yeah, that's John? You know, we want something that's reflective of you as an individual, and not so much concerned about what we want to hear, but what you want to share.
Do you have a question?
I do. Well, first of all, you should know that our, given the Bates connections up here, that one of our science teachers' father-in-law wrote the Bates fight song. So Freeport has that going for it, too. Amy Hunter's father-in-law, Hal Hunter, so check it out.
I had to sing that for initiation.
See?
I was a football player. I had to sing that in front of the whole dynamo.
I remember that. I remember the football team still did that.
Blame Hal Hunter. I mean, I was going to ask a different question, but this was really interesting about the essay. So we have an older son who goes to a school that's selective like that end of the table. But what matters to me is it's the right school for this child. So I'd love you to go through, sorry to do this to you again, not everybody has to do it, but when you nail it, give us a personal anecdote on when you nail it as an admissions person and you see this young person, sophomore, junior year, and you go, yep. So I mean, you can admit or not admit people for any number of different reasons, but give us an anecdote about when you really nailed it, what that looks like, because it must feel awfully good. So I'd like that opportunity for my second child. We seem to get it right through some weird alchemy with the first one. What's that look like when you nail it?
I've got one just real quick. One, I think it's important when I meet with the kids, I tell them, it's not like high school. You've got lots of free time. You can pick an academic major at any school, but when you're not in class, are you going to be happy? So what's that? Like trying to find the fit kind of leads to the next thing. So I think it was probably in November, and at UMF we have this place called Mainly Outdoors, because we love the outdoors. We're big skiers up there. And I was going over to get my son's skis tuned and waxed, and I saw this kid from Thornton Academy, and I knew he was like an outdoorsy skier, and there was a big storm coming the next day. And I saw him, and he had the biggest, he was just, because we're close to Sugarloaf, and I was like, I'll use his name, I was like, Tucker, you excited about tomorrow? And he was like, oh my God, John, it was like, and that's the kind of like, I was like, perfect fit, we nailed that one, he's in his element, he's studying business, but more importantly, he's so looking forward to these other things outside the classroom. So from that standpoint, I like that kind of fit, because I know, he could have gotten a business degree. I know some are better than others. I understand that. But for him, he wanted this, and he wanted to get up into the hills, on the weekends and do different things. So I was pumped, because I was like, I called the teachers at his school that I know. I was like, guess who I saw today? There's a snowstorm tomorrow. They're like, oh my God, he was so happy. And they were pumped for him. So that was one that's recent in my mind.
So part of our job is judging potential, right? Not everyone reaches their potential. Or hopefully you don't reach your potential at 17, right? We're trying to cultivate you and help you grow. I have a student at Bates right now, and this is a plug for interviewing. So I interviewed her, and she came alive in a half-an-hour conversation that on the application didn't do her justice. Not every student is their own best self-advocate on paper, but in person, they're dynamic. That's who she was. And I came across one of my colleagues in the dean's office, and he said, in her first year, she has lit the campus on fire. And then, hey, I had to fight for her in the committee, and I pushed on potential, and she really did have it. So interview, it does help humanize the process.
I think if you all seem to have a sort of gut intuition about your child and what might serve them best, and encourage you to follow that. And I applaud you for following that as opposed to rankings or prestige or the sticker on your car. I can say that sitting where I am, but that does matter to us too. And I think one of the myths I think about Bowdoin and other schools is that we just want the best kids from each school. that we're going to take the highest GPA and the highest test score of the kid with the most number of APs and the 5s. And it's maybe frustrating to hear, but I can't tell you how many children with perfect test scores we don't admit to Bowdoin because they're not the right fit for us. They're not going to join an a cappella group or a community discussion group. They're not going to try, any of the outing club trips or engage in the community of Brunswick in a meaningful way. So, I think if you look at like where we admit in a group of say we had 20 applicants from a high school, we're going to take the kid that's the best fit. And they might be in the middle of that group, right, if we organize them by GPA, because they were the right ones for us. So that matters to us, it matters to you. We want to have kids who are academically successful but personally successful as well. I had a student from Portland, Deering High School, who wrote his essay actually about, he was of Somali descent, but he was born here in Maine. And when he met Governor LePage said, where are you from? And Muhammad said, Portland. And the governor said, no, where are you from? And Muhammad was like, I was born in Portland, Maine. And he didn't tell that anecdote, but a teacher did. And he treated the governor with such respect in that interaction, and had also written about what it was like to be a man of color in Portland, Maine. He went on to become the president of the student body at Bowdoin because of his ability to empathize with others and what they had been through, and is now currently on a Truman scholarship abroad. So sometimes it's what the student tells us, and sometimes it's what your very lovely and talented guidance counselors fill us in on, and the teachers too. So sometimes it's not always the student, but what the community is saying about them.
That actually leads into one of the questions, because part of the application process, of course, we know is the transcript and the tests, the college essay, and we'll talk maybe about extracurriculars later, but let's talk about those recommendation letters, because those are important. So how do you all view those, and how important are they to the process? Nick, do you want to start? You haven't spoken in.
So letters of recommendation vary on how we look at them at our various institutions. Being a large public institution, we require one letter of recommendation. And if a student submits a second one, that is great as well. But for us, we're looking for that one letter of recommendation to give us a good overview of the student, whether it be from a guidance counselor or from a teacher. And what I will stress in this process is paying close attention to what our requirements are. If we require one and you send us 2, that's great, but don't send us 6 or 7 letters of recommendation. It's not going to make your chances of getting into the college any better in that sense. So we're looking for a letter of recommendation that's somebody that knows you well and can speak to your qualities overall. And this may be a teacher that you had last year, or maybe a teacher that you had 2 years ago. But we want somebody that can really express and kind of back up what we're seeing on paper already when we're looking at the transcript and when we're hearing your extracurricular activities, that this person that's writing about you is kind of solidifying that for us.
I think with the recommendation letters, I learned this lesson. I had a couple different teachers. My favorite teacher, Mr. So-and-so, probably my favorite teacher because it was the easiest class. So I was like, oh, he loves me. He's going to write this wonderful recommendation. I got an A, and it was like 2 paragraphs. It wasn't very good. And I was like, what the? I thought he liked me. Well, maybe there was a reason. His class was so easy because he's really not into extra work. So I had another teacher that really graded me tough. You get the paper back. It had a lot of red ink on it. There was a lot of thought put into it. Thought they didn't like me very much, and it was it was a really good recommendation. I was totally shocked, but it made me realize, that person who I thought was maybe a little bit tougher, they were tougher because they were putting more thought into my development. And yeah, my favorite teacher was cool and all that, but maybe they were, let's just get this one through. So really, maybe, I don't know how it works, if you can see them before. I haven't done it in a long time. If you can say, all right, I've got 3 pretty good ones, I'm going to use these 2 from the teachers if they show it to you. But don't underestimate somebody that puts a little extra time into you, even if it makes you uncomfortable. As I like to tell my kids, someday you'll be thankful that I'm making you uncomfortable. It's the same thing. A good teacher will constantly push you and try to make you better.
I guess one thing I would add is in choosing a teacher or a counselor or someone who knows you well, they shouldn't have to simply spend a paragraph or two recounting your own resume of your activities. We already have seen what you've done outside of class. It's really a chance for him or her to highlight a couple of academic anecdotes that sort of explain who you've been as a classroom learner. Maybe you've got a teacher that can comment that way who also was a coach. That can be really great, or an advisor to one of your clubs or to student government. And then an additional recommendation, if you're going to go one beyond, as Nick says, sometimes an employer or a community service supervisor out in the town can be just as valuable as a teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo all of that. Teacher recommendations are hugely important to us. We read them. The Common App requires 2, so that's what we require for our application process. There is an optional third letter of recommendation, and some students use that as an employer or a coach or a clergy member who knows them well, so that can add just another kind of piece to your file.
2 thoughts. 1, be mindful of your recommender's writing ability. Right? We read, like if I'm reading 1,000 applications, that means I'm reading 2,000 teacher recommendations a year. I appreciate a well-written letter of recommendation. 2nd, ask early for your letters of recommendation, right? If there's a popular junior year English teacher that everyone loves, everyone's going to probably ask that teacher for a recommendation, and we know how hard our teachers work, right? They don't get paid as well as they should for the amount of work that they do. So you're asking them to go above and beyond their workload, right? So ask them early, starting, I think, in the spring of the junior year, right? That can be an appropriate time to start thinking about letters of recommendation, who might write for you, and you can ask them before the summer. That's when they have the most free time. They might actually be able to get to it over the summer.
So I do want to be mindful of the time. There's one sort of big piece left I think a lot of people like to hear about is extracurriculars. And so if we can have everybody maybe reflect on that a little bit and how important they are to your schools and what you're looking for, that would be great. And then we can have a question and answer session. So is there anything on extracurriculars that you think would be important for students and parents to know?
It's not the time to be shy. I think it's really critical if you want us to see the largest, the most complete picture of who you are and how you spend your time. We actually, and I wouldn't be surprised if my colleagues share this, when we're reading an application, we have certain computer actions that we have to do. We have to hit a checkbox here, put a comment in there, rate this, rank that. And one of the things that we do at Roger Williams is we enter 2 data points related to the extracurricular page. One is a level of engagement from not very to extremely along a continuum. And the other is, have any of the activities been sustained for all 4 years? So we like students who have been engaged. And a student who's highly engaged might be engaged in 10 things or might be engaged in 2 things. It all depends on the things. So whatever, when students ask me, will this look good or will that look good? If it is good, it'll look good. If it's not good, we'll be able to know.
I think it should be, this is why I don't write the Common App. I would rewrite that to, what the heck do you do with your free time? Instead of extracurriculars. I think we have this perception of, oh, it's got to be music or drama, or I'm in sports or key club, whatever it is. And what do you do with your free time? Some people may not have the luxury to be able to participate in after-school activities because why? They work. Work is highly. I speak for myself. I like to know when somebody's working. I think it's a big deal. It's like real world. Like they're making money. Maybe they have to make money to support the family. So one of the things that drives me crazy is I'll look at the Common App, no extracurricular activities. Well, that's too bad. And then I'll read the recommendation letter. Oh, Susie Q works at Starbucks 30 hours a week and also takes care of her brother who's has Lyme's disease and is at home. Well, geez,
Yeah.
no wonder you can't do anything. So what do you do with your free time is a better indication of that. It could be anything.
I do think people think, to your point, I have to be student body president and star of the play and do all of this community service and work in a cancer research lab, have some hardship, that there's a list to check off. Yeah, when's your book coming out? What's your Denali experience? Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase I hear most often with teenagers is like, well, colleges want to see this or they want to see that. You all don't know, right? Like, we're all really different. We have, 5 really different institutions here, all looking for a different mix of musicians and artists and athletes. And to curate your high school experience about what a dozen or so colleges are looking for, to me, is really backwards. You should do what you're interested in and develop it, and maybe you lose interest in it and switch to something else. But we want to see that you do have things that bring you joy outside of academic work, I think is really the bottom line for us. We had a student a couple of years ago listed 4 things on the extracurricular section, and they were bassoon, 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 bassoon. All the kid did was play bassoon. Very cool instrument, awesome, very good at it, right? We admitted him because he had found something that brought him a lot of joy. He was not student body president, right? Like, he had not started the school play. He was not a sports captain. But he had found something that he really enjoyed doing that would contribute to our community. So I think the pressure on high schoolers these days to be perfect in academics and be perfect in extracurriculars can be really overwhelming. Because we expect you to sleep. We expect you to see your family, work, play, have fun. That has been lost, I think, in this process to some extent. And would just encourage you guys to do what you love. And maybe you haven't found anything you love yet, and that's okay too.
So that's a great way maybe to open it up to the audience. Are there any questions that anyone has for any of our panelists tonight?
I just want to continue on with what you were just talking about. I actually work at Freeport High School, and one of my roles here is I run our service club. But we have conversations a lot about how many activities kids really should be involved with. And for me personally, I'm just stating my opinion. This does not represent Freeport High School. I feel that some kids are too involved with too many activities, and they can't be. You can't put that much energy well into all of those activities, and it's creating, like you said, this pressure for these kids, and we see it all the time. So I guess my question is, and you did answer part of it, is more. The more we can hear from colleges and get that message out to our student body that you don't have to do all those things. I mean, the list for some of these kids is really long, and because I do run the service club, I know some kids say they're part of it, but they've hardly done anything. I'm not looking at their transcript. I'm not writing them letters of recommendations, but if someone asks me, I can say, no, they've checked the box. But I don't want them to just check the box. I'd rather them be there because they want to meet, or the student council, or whatever. So I think it's more of a suggestion or how we can get this message out to students all over the nation that we don't need to be doing this. It's not healthy. It's not sustainable.
Have you heard of Turning the Tide
Yes.
at Harvard?
Yes.
So Bowdoin and Bates too has signed on to this initiative that's nationwide called Turning the Tide. It's based out of Harvard School of Education, and the idea is that young people these days face unprecedented levels of anxiety and depression, and that it's our responsibility as educators to lay off. I think that counseling centers at colleges now are busy places. and that mental health has become increasingly something that we're seeing in applications. Students write about it very openly. We appreciate that. We all have services to support students who have mental health issues. But I think part of this is you have to do it all, you have to do it perfectly, and that one little thing will blow you up as an applicant to college. There's like, 30 colleges in this country that admit fewer than 20% of applicants or something ridiculous like that. Like, it's such a small slice of the colleges that exist in this country who offer amazing opportunities, and you're gonna be successful, where you end up. And I think it's our job as colleges to say, when kids come to our schools, how many activities can they logically be involved in? 3? Maybe? Right? So, the expectation, I think, as things have become more competitive, just in the sheer number of applications rising, is that you have to do more. And I just see who we admit, and it's not always, or most often, the kids that are doing the most and are the most stressed out. They're going to get into great places. But for us, what we're looking for are maybe kids who have experimented with doing a lot and have had to back off or have hit a bump in the road. Again, we do not expect you to be perfect.
One of the things that we've done at Bates, because we saw this phenomenon happening, is that we have a program called Purposeful Work. So how do we help students find joy and meaning in life? How do we help them align who they are with what they do? And it's based in social science. So if you want to look at that program, social scientists have a very hard time measuring happiness, but we can measure contentment. And we know that people that find the most contentment in life find a purpose. So we're finding students come to us having not done reflection, right? Not thought about what they value, who they are. So we're having to start from scratch. First years in college, right? They should have done some of this work already, but we're having to start from scratch. So the more high schools can do that, I think, the better transition will be to places like ours.
Great, thank you so much. Are there any other questions? So now we're going to bring all of our great panelists out into the FPAC lobby, and they will be available if you want to ask them any additional questions. And the 3 of us, the counselors, will be available to answer questions as well if anyone has any questions for us. So thanks so much for coming, and thank you so much, panelists.